Mikey here, Whiskey Delta Zero Oscar Mike with a quick intro to the intro. I've been promising videos on updating the FX-4CR to the V2 firmware by F5BUD for quite some time. Originally, this was going to be part 1 of 2, but now it's actually going to be 3. This video will be about upgrading firmware, both for the 1.73 and the V2 firmware of the FX-4CR. Part 2 will be the actual calibration. Part 3 will be a tour and review of the interface. That will keep them all relatively bite-sized. Then finally, I will get out and do an activation with the V2 firmware like I did last spring with the V1.7. Stay tuned, and we'll get started. So I've been promising for some time that I was going to do a video where I started to show how to update an FX-4CR to the third-party firmware, the V2 firmware being written by F5BUD from France. All reports are that this firmware provides many improvements over the stock firmware with the FX-4CR. And given that you, who actually created the radio and writes the firmware, or has it written, I'm not quite sure which, doesn't seem to be working actively on improving the firmware, this is how we now can actually get new features on this radio. I'm going to start going through the process now. I am still actually waiting on some equipment, but that equipment should be arriving over the weekend, and that is a couple of attenuators that you are supposed to get if you are going to do the full calibration, which we have to do. The first thing we have to do to update the FX-4CR is take note of the state it's currently in. And the reason we do that is if we want to restore the original firmware, we're going to need to restore all of its calibration under the original firmware. Now, I want to be clear about something. The two different versions of firmware do their math differently. I don't know the details. I don't need to know the details. And if you did need to know the details, they're open source. You can go look them up if you really need to. Point is that the coefficients in the calibration are different. They do not work the same way. They are not the same numbers between the V1.7 firmware that you provides when he ships the radio and the V2.x firmware that F5BUD Daniel provides. So we take note of the old coefficients, not to use in the new firmware, but in case we want to restore the old firmware. And then when we have finally successfully loaded the new firmware, we need to recalibrate it. And that is what I'm waiting on the attenuators for and other things. I've got a tiny SA, so I can do the signal analysis side of it. I've got a second receiver I can use also. I'm probably going to use the Hermes Light. I often wind up using the Hermes Light for these kinds of things where you need to calibrate one thing against another thing because it's fairly sensitive and because it's here in the house. I will get into the details of the why you need to do that as we go through each step. I am going to take you through each step, and I'm going to start with the getting at the coefficients. So let's get to that. All right, so this part's pretty straightforward. This part is just us getting into the development menu so we can see the coefficients that we are saving. So to do that, you hold down RIT while you hit power, and then you also tap menu. See? Development mode. Ta-da! And then we get this menu, which now here's where you got to be careful because I've already made a mistake. That's 65 at the top, which you should be able to see. Pretty sure that wasn't 65, but I twiddled the tune knob instead of the AF knob. The AF knob is what goes through the menu items, and the tune knob is what changes them. Now, we're not changing anything here. We are merely recording. I have reset it to what I think it was. Hopefully, I was correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a picture of each one of these screens, which includes the different phases and amps. And this is what I mean when I say the coefficients are different. These are the variables that are tweakable in this firmware, but as I understand it, having not gone through it yet, those variables will be different in the new firmware. So, like I said, I actually took photographs of these screens for my own purposes. They tell you to write it down, but I don't write anything down. I took photographs. They came out well enough. If I needed the numbers, I now have them. Let me walk you through the screens real quick, though. So we've got the power correction and AGC. I don't know what it actually means, AGC stare, but we've got signal correction. We've got TCXO correction. We've got some things about the display. We've got ALC start, ALC mic, and then we've got amp and phase for every band this radio does, which starts at 80, 60. You'll notice that the frequency actually changes as we go through these. 40, 30, 20, 17, 15, 12, 10, and 6. So that's all there is to it, really, for backing up the original numbers so you have them. In the next segment, I will show you how to actually update the firmware. Stay tuned. Okay, so I'm doing this a little differently. I almost never record here at my desk, mainly because the desk is a mess, but I've got the camera fairly tightly focused. You can kind of see the mess of cables and other things. I've got the webcam from my computer pointing at me, and I have got the DFI programmer up here, DFU programmer up here, STM32 Cube programmer. Now, I'm going to show this. I'm going to show it twice. Once I'm going to show it because there actually is a release of the official firmware that's relatively recent, a 1.73, and I'm going to basically do a test run with that first. Make sure that works, make sure the procedure works the way it's supposed to work. And then, after I've got that working correctly, I will go ahead and flash the Daniel firmware, the F5 BUD firmware. There are lots of sources for the details of this, including the manual, which is pretty good, and I am basically following the manual's instructions. You will need to download this program, STM32 Cube Programmer, and I have found that to be a little annoying. I actually was originally going to do this on one of my Linux laptops over on the work table, which is slightly less disastrously messy. The website right now is being a pain in the butt. STM's website is being a pain in the butt when you go to register an account, which it absolutely requires in order to download anything, and then it times out when you try to set a password. And their customer service has not been useful so far in trying to solve this problem, so I just gave up. I already had it installed here on my PC. So I'm just here on my PC. Anyway, let's get to it. So first thing to do is to actually load in the firmware. And in case that went by a little fast, I went to the Open File tab, and then I clicked on the file I already had downloaded from the official bg2fx.org site, whichever it is. I'll link it in the comments. I'll make sure it's linked. And you see, I've got a bunch of hex here, which is not very meaningful to us. I've already got this set up for USB, but it doesn't have anything it's connected to. And here is where things get a little awkward, because somehow I need to use two hands to do this and not knock anything over on my table. And I am a klutz, but we're going to try to do this. So in order to make this work, you hold down F, you hold down power, you release F, you refresh so that it finds the USB, then you connect. Now it's connected. And now you say, download. You do not let go of the power button. You'll notice I am holding it the whole time. And it says file download complete. And I'm going to take that at its word. And now I'm going to release the power button. And now it boots up with the new firmware. And in case that went by a little fast, I'll shut it down again. And you can see it says 173, which is what we want. That's the version. Before this, it was 1.7. Now it is 1.73. So far so good. This works the way I expect it to work with use firmware, and it seems to boot up just fine. All right, so now we're going to start talking about the upgraded firmware, or how to upgrade the firmware and what to do. And the instructions for this are pretty clear. I have not been through them all. I have not rehearsed this. I'm going to be doing this right along with you and hopefully not make any mistakes that brick the radio. The good news is I don't think it's possible to brick the radio. I think all you have to do is reflash another firmware and it will work. So I've got the website up. You will see here the great big caution. You need to be ready to do the right thing. He also makes it clear that you should make sure to back up your settings, which we already talked about in the earlier part of this video. Now, I did not use his worksheet here, and that also means that I skipped this bottom part, but I just went through it real quick, and it turns out that all of these numbers are the same for my radio, all in the same band. Amp is always 1000 and phase is always 100. So always the same. I never made any changes. So that's how it came to be calibrated. I'm going to assume it's okay. I'm going to leave that alone. At any rate, if you do want to write down everything that you need to write down to back it up, this is the form to do it with. Back to the main page. You need to be very careful about which firmware you download for your radio. I have an R revision radio, which is the current radio. And you can see this when you boot up. And you can see this when you boot up next to the version number of your current firmware. It will have an R next to it if it's an R revision radio. The R does not mean revision 1.73. The R means you have an R-type radio, and it's version 1.73. There's also a V version of the radio. There's also an RV version of the radio, which Danielle has not made a firmware for. So if you've got that version, which I think is the first version, the version 1 hardware, unfortunately, you are out of luck, and you are stuck with whatever U is stuck. It's pretty good, but you only have what U is providing. If you want to use the newer firmware, unfortunately, you do need to get newer hardware. I don't know if there's any way around that. I have not looked into that. You also note, I mentioned earlier I was having trouble getting hold of the official programming software for Linux. It turns out I could have used a command line utility called dfuutil. So if you are a Linux person only, you can use dfuutil to do this as well. I am not going to be demonstrating that because I'm already set up to do this with Windows. And I figure Windows or Mac OS are more common. And for both of those, again, the programmer is also available. So I'm going to be downloading the correct firmware for me, which is this one here. This is the most recent version. I'm going to live on the edge because this is literally today's version. I am recording this on the 9th of November. So here's hoping. All right. And that is downloaded. You probably can't see the little window saying it's downloaded. I'm going to get that unpacked and then I will be back. All right, and I am back, and as you can see, we now have several files. We have the .bin that you could use with dfuutil. We have the .hex we're going to use with the STM programmer. There's a changelog here, and there's the Rev2 of the user manual, which is what we're going to be using to step through to calibrate the radio later. I do not think I need to look that over right now, although I will look it over real fast to make sure that I'm not going to make any mistake when I actually do the flash. So I'm going to do that right now, and then we're going to get to the flashing. And if there is anything that really needs to be called out, I will bring that into the recording, but you don't need to see me reading a manual just to make sure I'm getting it right. So give me a second and I'll be right back. You know what? After a minute's thought, I decided I would actually show the page just to show you what you should look for in the manual. Definitely read the manual. Always read the manual eventually. I'll be going through everything about the new firmware anyway, which will, be coming out of the manual. Just like I did for the original firmware, that'll be a separate video. This video is about the actual update and calibration, and then I will have another video where I review the firmware in full the way I did the original. So, got the link to grab the stuff, and then it gives you the instructions that I've already gone through on Windows. And then if you're on Linux, here are the instructions to use dfuutil. So I wouldn't call it straightforward exactly, but it's all right here. And if you're at all comfortable with Linux at the command line, you should be able to do this. This should not be outside of your capabilities, in my opinion. We've got a bunch of troubleshooting here and so on. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, as I said. I just wanted to point out, if you are a Linux person and you're a little scared of DFU util, it's all right here, and I don't think it would be hard for you to do. If there's enough interest, I will go ahead and do it, but I'm not going to do it preemptively. Like, go ahead and comment on the video if you want to see me walk through the Linux procedure. Anyway, let me come back and do this thing here on Windows. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to keep the video going and switch Windows because I can do that. All right. All right. So once again, USB mode, not connected to anything yet. No DFU. We need a different file though. So I'm going to tell it to open a file you can't see the menu. Let's see if I can change that. Can I fix it? Nope, still doesn't capture the menu. All right, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so once again, you're not going to see the menu or the dialog box, but I am going to click here and you will get a little menu and it will say open file at the very top, which is what you want. And then I'm going to go ahead and select the, whoops, I didn't want the zip file. That was almost tragic. I'm going to go ahead and select the hex file from the zip file. That's much better. That's what we want. And now, here we go again. I am going to hold F and power and release F and refresh. And there we are. And I'm going to connect. And we are connected. And I'm going to download. And that's pretty fast. It really was that fast. It now says file download complete. Again, I know you can't see that, and I'm going to release it and let it power off. And now I'm going to power it on, and it should be the new firmware. Look at that. Look at that. Magic. Absolute magic. Now, of course, this is not calibrated. This is not ready to do anything except show me a screen. That's what we're going to do next, is walk through the calibration. But I wanted to get through this and show you that's how easy it is, actually. It feels involved. It sounds involved to actually do the update. It's not. It's a little clumsy because you've got to hold the buttons down and you've got to get this special programming software and blah, 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 blah. But it's all step by step. And if you've already learned how to set up an antenna and a radio and all the rest of it, this shouldn't be too scary. And as I said, I really don't think you can brick it. I'm going to go real quick through what I see here for the first time. Again, I have not actually read through the manual. This is sight unseen, and I'm going to give you my impressions while I'm here. Just quick impressions of the main screen. The fonts I find clearer, so that's good. Right off the bat, the fonts are clearer. All the same information is here, and mostly in the same places. It's a little different, maybe. Noise reduction, noise blanker. I'm not sure what NT means just yet. We'll find out all together. I've got the filter. The filter's pretty small right now. I don't know why. There we go. We've got backlights again. Now, look, there's the version number. I pushed a button. You push menu. You just tap menu, and you get the current release. That's good to know. How about that? That's already useful. And let's look at the menu itself. If it actually, apparently the menu button no longer brings up a menu. I'm going to switch to SSB. This is on a dummy load. I was smart enough to put a dummy load on it because I'm not completely stupid, but I did want to just quickly see how the screen changes when you change things around. So yeah, the top line, not that different, but in my opinion at least. So the top row is much clearer font, much clearer colors. I think the use of color in general is much clearer. Again, I'm on a dummy load. There's no signal to speak of coming in, and we're uncalibrated. You can see the A and the B VFO very clearly. I like that a lot. Yeah, so far, I like what I see. I'm going to enjoy finding how this thing actually works in this version. I do like, though, I'm going to shut it down. And then I'm going to turn it on again, and you notice how very quickly it comes on. Now, there's no slow boot up. It just comes right on. I like that a lot. That's a nice touch. I like that it just, bang, it's there for you when you're ready to use it. So that is the update of the firmware. Next up will be the calibration. Stay tuned.